Hi, my name is Lauren Webb. I'm the Director of Support Services and Education for the Les Turner ALS Foundation. So I'm going to tell you a little bit about the foundation. But before I do that, I wanted to acknowledge that we have received funding and support from the Gilbert and Jacqueline Fern Foundation and other donors to the foundation. And we've received industry funding from Cytokinetics, a communication fellowship grant, which actually helped prove our proof of concept and enabled me to start on this crazy journey, and Novartis Gene Therapies and Biogen. Les Turner ALS Foundation is one of the leaders in comprehensive care and ALS research. We are located in Chicago, and we're committed to serving the community. And so we've been doing this for over 45 years. And we've learned a lot of different lessons about decision-making through our one-on-one personalized conversations with families, through our support group meetings, and through our educational materials and programs, which we knew that we needed to revamp. And so this started our long journey as well. We are connected with the Northwestern Medicine Center. We have the Les Turner ALS Center, the Lois and Solia ALS Clinic. It's a multidisciplinary clinic. So we partnered with the clinicians at Northwestern to help design the tool, and also worked very closely with the multidisciplinary care team. And so I just wanted to, bring this to the forefront. I carried around Dr. Paganoni's guide from 2017 in Muscle and Nerve, where she talked about multidisciplinary care. This was transformational for me in 2017 because it really is the focus of patient-centered, that the clinical trial environment is part of care, and what that has to be is really infused with hope, right? And this is really the point of the work that we do every day, and how do we get these groups of people to work together to provide support. And that, multidisciplinary care does improve access and does help people living with ALS and hopefully greater access to therapy, although, as we've been learning, it's a big challenge. And I just wanted to share this photo. This is a photo of Julie at one of our clinics. She's a support service coordinator, and so she talks just so beautifully. Every time I talk to Julie, I just feel lighter, and I can imagine how families feel with engaging. But she really talks about, providing people with information and supporting them with whatever choice they make regards their care. So that's really an important tenet, right? It's not the best care. It's not this is what you should do. It's really about what do you want to do, and what does that look like? And we know from the literature that decision-making, and I'm so grateful for our international colleagues who are funding and sponsoring this work around decision-making in the ALS MND space. It's just been really helpful to dive into the literature and better understand what composes and makes up decision-making. So we know there's individual philosophy, there's different support structures, there's different, capabilities at a regional level. Communication, it's very hard to be able to express your wishes and desires, as you're learning and maybe not have access to all the technology that we just talked about. And caregiver relationships and families. Families are all different. Everything looks different. And relationships and trust with the multidisciplinary care team. And I think that's an area that's really important. And then we honed in on a little bit on different learning styles. And that's where we started our journey to really look at health literacy. And so we looked at the focus of decision-making tools in other diseases. And what we know from the literature with MND and ALS is that the purpose of a decision tool is to simplify complex medical decisions, gauge a patient's understanding of those choices, and to help clarify preferences and address in other diseases, they've shown that shared decision-making tools, interactive decision-making tools, help address some health inequalities, particularly in the asthma space, right? Explaining and walking through different treatment options. And again, the whole point is to facilitate conversation with your team. And I wanted to bring up the Morris Principles. I think about this often, and every time we have a new person who joins the foundation, or I have a conversation with industry, I really bring that up because I think we have our fundamental rights here at the Alliance, and I think those are really critical and important. But I think one of the key components of the Morris Principles in the States, if you haven't had an opportunity, I really encourage you to take a look. But they really talk about shared decision-making and really working comprehensively with the care team and providing access and giving options, right, for genetic testing, which the screen is off, but it's giving options for genetic testing, even for those with no known family history. And so that's, one of the core things. And we've really relied on that to help us, in addition to the fundamental rights, to have us take an honest look at our service delivery, and are we actually living up to these principles? Are we living up to the fundamental rights at our own foundation? And, there's a whole community that's dedicated to shared decision-making. And, we looked at the American Academy of Neurology, their quality measures, and that's what was guiding us in terms of the selection of our first two modules for the decision-making tool. We partnered up with Communicate Health, which is a health literacy company, and most recently in July, we won a Clear Mark Award for the Center for Plain Language. And we've really collaborated with with Neil's ALS Clinical Research Learning Institute. We hosted an online forum in 2020, and a lot of those folks were part of building out our projects. But this work really was driven through a meeting in Perth in 2019, and with our Australian colleagues who have built this model and who we've adapted and created the U.S. spin on how we talk about things in the States in accordance with some of our phrasing and some of our guidelines. But I also want to acknowledge that there's this and I would love the Alliance to do a whole thing on decision-making. I think that's going to be, I think that would be really remarkable, because we have our international colleagues that are doing this deep dive into decision-making, and there are other groups that are also doing this work. So a bit about the decision tools. So this was launched in 2021 of December. And again, it's really dedicated to helping to improve health outcomes. It's freely accessible to anyone to use. And, our first two modules are focused on breathing and also on nutrition. So I'm going to share with you, hopefully this works. This is technology. This is a comment from, oops, let me go backwards. Is the audio working? Okay. Oh, bummer. Well, I'll just show you I'm doing this right? I'm like looking at the tech team. So I'll just walk you through.
I connected with the Les Turner Foundation recently and learned about their abundance of resources, including decision tools, guides, and webinars, which were developed by a stellar team of patients, caregivers, and staff. As someone who navigated and led our family talks about breathing and nutrition, I have a deep appreciation for the first two My ALS Decision Tool modules, which are step-by-step tools to guide patients or their caregivers through tough topics and subject matter. From personal experience, these were rocky conversations and always difficult to discuss as a family. For a long time, these topics weren't critical to us, and then in the blink of an eye, they became essential decisions that had to be made in a hurry. I like that the tools are for information gathering and explain your options rather than pushing anyone towards a decision. The tool helps frame these conversations, simply laying out different benefits and drawbacks in a clear and easy to understand format. If you are in the middle of using the tool and want to stop, you have that ability. When you're finished, you can get a recap of your choices, which helps provide a bookmark of sorts, making future discussions easier. Many of these decisions are made over time, and it can be overwhelming to remember everything about a topic. There are a tremendous amount of factors that patients and their support circle must consider, and from my experience, this step-by-step tool is the most comprehensive I have seen to date. It seems to be the simplest and most direct way of gaining information on key topics that affect the ALS community. The Foundation is planning to roll out additional tools over time and ensure those in the ALS world are able to benefit as much as possible.
And that was Tyler, and I met him last year at the International meeting in a breakout group, and he had lost his mother to ALS that July. And that began a really wonderful partnership with someone that we didn't serve in our local area. And now he's serving on the Department of Defense reviewing grants and really is engaged and really helped. This is the important thing of co-producing materials and information and learning and listening. And Tyler's insights really helped craft how we talk about the tool. And then one more, hopefully if this works, another wee bit from Tyler.
In addition to their decision tool, they also have multiple guides: breathing, nutrition, communication, mobility, home modifications, and activities of daily living. As someone who fought tirelessly to make headway in all these areas, the guides offer a laundry list of tips, tricks, and hacks to help anyone with ALS adapt to a variety of limitations. Due to the unique nature of ALS and the varied progression rates that all in the community face, the guides are laid out with multiple ideas and levels of accommodation to create a wide spectrum of usable adaptations. Your needs today may not be the same next month, and each guide does well in showcasing solutions for the present and the future. They provide a terrific starting point to assist support circles and their loved ones in being proactive and managing the ongoing adjustments and modifications that ALS patients currently need or will require at some point. I encourage you to visit their website and utilize the abundance of helpful tools, guides, and webinars at your own pace. As we all try to advance care and support for the ALS community, I hope these resources make your path forward a little bit easier.
And all of these guides were developed with health literacy principles, with the CDC, with different frameworks around icons, simple language, really. I reflected that, for 20 years I've been hiding behind medical language. And then when I actually had to explain what something was, it was very challenging. And I can't imagine being thrown into having to figure this out. And so we wanted to create something that was accessible, that was pleasing to the eye, and really helped break down some of those. So we have had, with our coordinators, we've had over 500 conversations, one-on-one conversations with regards to the tool. We've had over 4,000 views of the tool. We also views of the information guide. And then we also have an ALS learning series that we do. And so this has all been transformed since we started in 2020 was the beginning of our modernization of our community education program, because we used to do all of our work at kitchen tables. And so now I'm so happy to be able to share this very personalized work in a much broader audience and with you all. Some of the key lessons that we learned, this is a phrase, co-production of care. I learned this from the cystic fibrosis community, and they took this from, everything has to be produced together, and it has to be part of a learning journey, and we have to be on it together, and we have to be really vulnerable. I'm dyslexic. Sometimes I hand people living with ALS and their caregivers some really bad drafts, and that's okay because I know I'm safe and supported, and we have each other, and that's how we work together, and we continuously are honest, and how do we drive the conversation? How do we work to each other's best ability? And that's really where we've learned together. And so after we launched, we've spent 6 months talking with ALS groups in the States and having one-on-one conversations. One of my first conversations was with Phil shortly and Sandy Morris shortly after it was launched. And, they really talked about the need for a clinical trial decision tool. They talked about a need for a genetics decision tool. And so their voices were constantly in my head as we were having conversations with people. Again, it's the implementation from the providers, so we'll be presenting this to the APF. So it's all about the delivery and the time in which you start the conversations. And I think we all have this abstract concept of what is shared decision-making, and it really starts with the relationship with the provider, the trust, the opening of the door. We are going to be launching a genetics decision tool, and from our conversations with some genetic counselors, they're really excited about it because they see this as an opportunity to reduce some of their workload in terms of preparing, having people be informed and engaged, and having the conversation to really help with some of the workforce issues that we have in the States, and I know are even more challenging in other areas. The other thing that I learned, I did not know anything about search engine optimization. We had developed these beautiful guides that were PDFs, and people can't find PDFs, is what I learned. And we got a Google Ads grant, and so we're really working on optimizing so more people can find us as well. So again, we follow this process that's been built over time. We plan, we discover, we define what is it, what is the need, and then we build and we launch, and it's all driven with people living with ALS, their caregivers. And one of the key things is that we followed this. There's a roadmap for how to develop tools, and we followed that roadmap and modified it for our purposes and for the foundation. We developed new caregiver resources in 2021 or in 2022, and that was because I met an occupational therapy student at this meeting last year in our workshop groups, and she was amazing in interviewing and working with the community. She lost her grandmother to ALS, and this meeting matters so much to the foundation. This is where we gather ideas and we grow and we learn together. And again, so we will be launching in 2023 genetic testing module, and so we're currently under development. So if anybody's interested in reviewing and being part of user testing, we'll be working on that shortly. And we're really excited about that. We also have aspirations for, clinical research module. We're still trying to figure out exactly what that would look like. So I didn't want to put it on the slide just yet, because I don't want to answer those questions because I'm not sure. This is just, thanking all the people that were involved and part of building this out. Again, we've had over 75 people in the community who were involved in this project from the beginning. So that's been really, really helpful. And then there's Tyler at our poster at Neil's, which was super. I missed it. I wasn't at Neil's, but there he is. So thank you. Thank you to everyone. And that's just some of our references. Thank you for allowing us the opportunity to share our results 1 year later.
Thank you, Lauren. I have so many questions because I always have questions, but I just want to start with, how can we access this tool? Can you share that link with everybody here?
Yeah, you can go on Les Turner website, and it's under education, and it's a drop down. It says My Decision Tool, but the easiest way also is lesturnerals.org/resources, and it lists different things. But we're working on our navigation on our website, but it is all freely available on lesturnerals.org.
Amazing. I hope we can do this in every language, basically, because I think it facilitates a conversation so much. Those hard subjects that PALS or CALS don't want to touch, but then the tool is made so easy for them to talk about that. And also the possibility that you can stop at any time and then take it again whenever you feel like it, or actually retaking the tool. Every model, for example, when I remember my dad would say, I don't want a wheelchair ever. And of course, 2 years later, he had to wear a wheelchair. He's like, oh, I actually love the wheelchair. I don't know why I didn't use it before. So he changed his mind, and that it happens with, I think, every PALS there is. So I think it's amazing that it's always online, so you can actually access it at any time. So enough about my questions and comments. Does anybody here want to do a comment or a question, or anybody virtually? Yes, virtually.
This is from Diane from the ALS Society of Quebec. Thank you for your presentation. This is amazing work that supports families making ongoing decisions in their ALS and caregiving journeys. How do you ensure that information is kept up to date as realities and advances change in ongoing manner?
Yeah, we wrote we followed the practice parameters in the states in order to guide the conversation around the tools. We didn't get into specifics around particular things like the forced vital capacity, for the feeding tube. We didn't want to do that because we know practice looks different, at all different levels. And we have a review process, so we've updated some. The communication world, thank you so much. We already had to update our materials, companies come and go and, the changes. So it is a challenge to update, but what we decided to do as we created these materials is to keep them evergreen, with the exception of communication, evergreen, so that way it's accessible and allows for that variance as well. So hopefully that's helpful.
Any more questions? I have another question. Is it available in more languages or just English right now?
It's just English right now. We did write a grant, and we didn't get funding, but I do have prices for how much it is to, translate in other languages. We do know that there is a clear need for that, and we're trying to understand what does that look like for our community, and how can we best serve. One of the things about decision-making tools, in particular, the interactive tools, it really has to be written. It's not just a simple translation. It has to be written from the practice of the work that the providers do, of what the community values are, how you phrase things. It's really complex and also easy, right? So it's like this whole thing, but we're definitely open to working with other folks.
Amazing. I think we have another question from our virtual attendees.
Yes, but one from the attendee right here first. You said evergreen for communication. Why break that out?
Oh, I was just, because I was kind of being flippant. I'm sorry, sometimes my humor gets lost. So with the communication, like the different speech apps, right? Like everything constantly changes in that space, and it's difficult for that particular guide that we developed. I still think the core principles hold true. And I know John Costello's group is developing a decision. We were going to do an assistive technology decision, tool. But John's group is working on that. So we don't need to do that, right? So it's all about not duplicating efforts, but really looking at where we can make a difference, and we really felt that health literacy and shared decision-making tools was one way that the foundation could help the community.
Okay, thank you for that. And then we have one virtual question. And can you elaborate on how you enable families to find PDFs or alternatives to PDFs? In other words, how do you maximize access to information that families are looking for?
Yeah, and that's something that I want to learn, and I would love to have a conversation around that. I mean, the previous presenter was talking about the difficulty of, accessing information, and we know that, people are searching late at night. Anxiety is really high. They're typing in all sorts of phrases, and I know that Everything ALS is really working on better understanding how people search for information, and it's that keyword. So we really need to better understand as a community, how are people looking for information, and then making sure that looks. And I'm just beginning that journey in terms of understanding, but I do know that when your anxiety level is high, your ability to discern information is very difficult. And we want to make sure that people are going to trusted places and getting the information that they need and are finding it, right? So it doesn't do us any good to develop all this stuff if people can't find it. And so, that's my plea. Please share the decision tool on social media, and we look forward to working with the community more and learning together.
Okay. Thank you so much, Lauren.